My son-in-law convinced my daughter I was just a bitter, jealous old man, until they cussed me out completely for 12 years. Then the welding shop I'd been building quietly out of my garage grew into something neither of them could have imagined. I sold it for $14 million, paid cash for a spread of land in the Texas Hill Country, and finally started breathing again. 3 weeks after I moved in, they pulled up the driveway in a rented SUV, with 6 bags and a smile I hadn't seen since my daughter wanted me to co-sign on a car loan. What happened next is something they are still thinking about to this day. My name is Eugene Calloway. I am 67 years old. I spent 40 years with grease under my fingernails and a welding mask pushed up on my forehead, and I would not trade a single day of it. I was standing on the back porch of the new place the morning they showed up, drinking my first cup of coffee and watching a white-tailed deer pick her way along the creek bed at the edge of the property. The land was 60 acres of cedar and limestone and clear running water, and I had bought every inch of it outright. I had not told a soul except my attorney and my accountant. As far as the world knew, Eugene Calloway was a retired welder living modestly somewhere outside of Kerrville. The doorbell rang. I set my mug on the railing. When I opened the front door, I did not speak for a moment. Standing on my porch were 2 people I had not seen in person since the day I watched them drive away from my late wife's graveside service without looking back. My daughter, Faye, looked older than her 39 years. She was wearing a smile that did not reach her eyes. Beside her stood my son-in-law, Bryce, in a polo shirt 2 sizes too small and a watch he could not afford. Behind them both, half hidden behind Faye, was a girl of about 14, with her arms crossed and her eyes fixed on the cedar planks of my porch floor. I looked at my granddaughter, Olivia. She had been 2 years old the last time I held her. Faye stepped forward before I could say anything. She opened her arms the way you open a door you were not sure is locked. "Daddy," she said. "Oh, Daddy, it is so good to see you. I have missed you so much." I did not move. She let her arms fall and rearranged the smile. Bryce cleared his throat and stuck out his hand. "Gene," he said. "Place looks great. Real, rustic. You always did like the simple life." Simple life. The man said that on the porch of a 4-bedroom stone house with a workshop the size of a small aircraft hangar out back. I shook his hand because my mother raised me to, not because I wanted to. "What are you doing here?" I said. It was not a question. It was a request for an explanation that I expected to be inadequate. Faye's chin wobbled. That was always her first move. The chin wobble preceded the tears, and the tears preceded whatever she needed you to believe. "We wanted to see you," she said. "It has been too long. Life is too short, Daddy. We have been doing a lot of praying about this, and we feel like God is calling us to reconcile. We want to be here for you. You are not getting any younger, and this place is so isolated, and I looked past her at the rented SUV sitting in my driveway. There were more bags in the back than you bring for a weekend." "How long are you planning to stay?" I said. Faye and Bryce exchanged a look. That look told me everything. Bryce put on the voice he used when he was selling something. "Just until we get back on our feet, Gene, things have been a little tough. The market, you know. My consulting work dried up. We figure family sticks together in hard times. And you've got all this space." There it was. I looked at my granddaughter again. She had not moved. She had not looked up. She was standing in the careful stillness of a kid who has learned that staying quiet is safer than being noticed. "Come in," I said. Faye brightened immediately. Bryce relaxed his shoulders. I held the door open. "Just Olivia," I said. The brightness dropped off Faye's face like something falling off a shelf. "Daddy, you two wait on the porch," I said. "I want to talk to my granddaughter alone. Get her a glass of water. She looks like she has been in a car for hours. Then we will all sit down and have a conversation." Bryce opened his mouth. I looked at him. He closed it. Olivia followed me inside without a word. I poured her a glass of water and set it on the kitchen island. She drank half of it without stopping. She was thin in a way that worried me. Her fingernails were chewed to the quick. She had dark circles under her eyes that no 14-year-old should have. "You don't have to pretend with me," I said. "I don't know you well enough for you to owe me anything. But I am going to be straight with you, and I am hoping you will do the same." She looked up at me for the first time. She had her grandmother's eyes. That hit me somewhere below the sternum. "Are you really sick?" she said. I blinked. "What?" "Dad told me you had a heart thing," she said. "He said you needed help around the property." "That's why we came." She paused. "At least that is what he told me." I sat down on the stool across from her and thought about that for a moment. "My heart is fine," I said. "Who told your father I had a heart condition?" She looked at her hands. "I don't know. He just said you reached out. That you needed family close by." She looked up again. "You didn't reach out, did you?" It was not a question either. "No," I said. She nodded slowly like she had suspected as much. She picked up the water glass and turned it in her hands. "Grandpa," she said, and the word sounded careful, like she was testing the weight of it. "Something is wrong, like really wrong, with them. We lost the house in March. Dad's been—" She stopped. "I don't know exactly what he's been doing, but Mom cries at night, and there are men who call his cell phone and he always walks outside to answer, and he looks sick when he comes back in." I kept my face steady. "What kind of men?" I said. She shook her head. "I don't know. But one of them came to the apartment. Twice. He drove a black car and he had this guy with him. Like a big guy who just stood by the door." I thanked her. I told her she was safe. I told her to go watch television in the living room and I would handle the rest. She nodded and slid off the stool, and as she walked past me, she stopped and said quietly, without looking at me, "He keeps talking about your land. What it's worth. How much you could get if you needed to sell quick." I sat there after she left and I finished my coffee. It was cold by then, but it didn't matter. I went back to the porch. Bryce was standing at the railing looking out at the property with the evaluating eyes of a man running numbers. Faye was sitting on the porch swing scrolling her phone. Neither of them asked about Olivia. That told me a great deal. "All right," I said. 30 minutes. Sit down." Faye put her phone away. Bryce turned around. I let them talk. Bryce gave me the polished version first. Consulting had slowed down. Some investments had gone the wrong direction. It was temporary. They just needed a stable base while things righted themselves. Faye chimed in at the right moments, nodding, looking pained, touching Bryce's arm. It was a performance. A decent one, but a performance. Then Bryce's phone buzzed in his pocket. He silenced it. It buzzed again 30 seconds later. And again. "Who is calling?" I said. "Nobody," he said. "Spam. You know how it is." I watched his jaw tighten every time the phone went quiet. That was not spam. That was somebody who expected an answer. I told them they could use the 2 guest rooms for the night. I said we would talk in the morning about next steps. Faye hugged me. I let her. Bryce shook my hand again and said I was a good man. I went to my room and locked the door and called my attorney. Her name is Patrice. Wait, no. Her name is Donna Marsh. She had been my corporate attorney since the early days of Callaway Fabrication, back when we were doing custom agricultural equipment in a converted hay barn. She answered on the second ring even though it was past 9 o'clock, because that is the kind of attorney you want. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Run a background check or I will." "Run it," I said, "and Donna, find out if there is any debt tied to his name. Real debt. The kind with a collection arm." She said she would have something by morning. I did not sleep much. Through the wall I could hear Bryce's voice, low and urgent. I could not make out words, but I could hear the cadence of a man who was either begging or negotiating. Donna called me at 7:15 the next morning. It was worse than I had built it up to be in my head, and I had built it up considerably. Bryce had a judgment against him in Travis County for a failed real estate partnership. He owed close to $300,000 to a private lending group out of Houston. He had defaulted on 2 business loans in the past 18 months. There was a civil fraud complaint filed by 4 investors who said he had solicited funds for a commercial development project that existed only on paper, and the kicker, there was a lien filed against the apartment they had just vacated, which meant they had not just lost the house, they were running. They had not come to reconcile. They had come to hide inside my equity. I thanked Donna. Then I asked her to look into the Houston lending group and find out who held the paper on Bryce's debt. She called back 40 minutes later. The principal creditor, she said, is a private lending company called Meridian Capital Solutions, registered in Texas, controlled by a man named Felix Dunn. She paused. Eugene, this man is not a legitimate lender. He has 2 previous civil suits for predatory lending practices. The principals of his firm have been investigated twice by the Texas AG's office. How much does Bryce owe him specifically? I said. After penalties and interest, she said roughly $380,000. I stood at the kitchen window watching the deer trail along the creek again. I thought about Olivia and her chewed fingernails and the dark circles and the big man who stood by the apartment door. Buy the debt, I said. Donna went quiet. Eugene, whatever Meridian Capital will take for it, buy it. Cash. Today. I want to be the one holding that note. She understood immediately. She did not argue. That is the other thing you want in an attorney. I spent the rest of that morning acting like a man who had nothing on his mind but his morning routine. I made biscuits from scratch, the recipe my wife had taught me the first winter we were married. I asked Bryce how he took his coffee. I asked Faye whether Olivia had any food allergies. I shuffled around the kitchen in my slippers and let Bryce assume I was exactly what he expected. A lucky old tradesman out of his depth in a big house, grateful for company. Faye warmed up to me in the way people warm up when they think they are winning. She started telling me what furniture would look better in different rooms. She mentioned twice that the guest room she was using had a lovely view and would make a wonderful primary bedroom for someone who needed a single-floor arrangement. I kept my expression gentle and my eyes somewhere past her shoulder. That afternoon, while they were upstairs, I drove into Kerrville and sat in Donna's office. She slid a folder across the desk to me. The debt transfer is complete, she said. You are now the note holder for $382,000 in delinquent personal loans bearing Bryce's signature. She opened the folder to the first page. Donna, I said, did you find anything else? She turned to the second tab. There is a social services report from 18 months ago, she said. A school counselor in Austin flagged Olivia for suspected neglect. The report noted chronic absenteeism, weight loss, and statements the child made to a school therapist about instability at home. CPS conducted an initial inquiry. Bryce and Faye complied enough to close the case, but the file is open. I sat back in the chair. This child, I said, has been waving flags for 1.5 years. Yes, Donna said. What do I need to do to file for emergency custody? She looked at me. Are you certain? I am certain, I said. She pulled out a legal pad. Then let me tell you what we are building. I drove home in the late afternoon with a plan that was clean and complete in my mind. The kind of plan you can only make once you have stopped being angry and started being strategic. Anger is a fire in a field. Strategy is a controlled burn. I had been angry for 12 years. I was done with that now. That evening, after dinner, I told them I had been thinking about getting my affairs in order. Bryce's posture changed immediately. Subtle, but I noticed. I said I was not as young as I used to be, and the property was a lot to manage alone, and I had been thinking I might need someone to help oversee things. I said I had an attorney, but she was expensive and complicated, and what I really needed was family I could trust. I let my voice go a little thin and tired. I let my hand shake slightly when I picked up my coffee cup. Faye reached across and covered my hand. "Of course, Daddy," she said. "We are here. We are not going anywhere." Bryce nodded earnestly. "We want to help, Jean. Whatever you need. We could even look into, just to protect you, some kind of arrangement where Faye has oversight of the property decisions. Just so you are not carrying that alone." There it was. 6 hours in, and he was already reaching for the lever. I nodded slowly like I was considering it. "Maybe you are right," I said. "Maybe I need to think about that. Can I sleep on it?" "Of course," Bryce said. "Take all the time you need." He said that with the ease of a man who believed he had already won. That night I stood in the dark hallway outside the guest room, and I heard him on the phone. The door was not fully latched, and his voice carried. He said, "It is easier than I thought." He said, "She's got him eating out of her hand." He said, "I just need a week, Felix. Tell your guy to stand down. I have access to 60 acres of hill country real estate and a business sale in the 8 figures. Give me a week and I will have everything we need to settle this." Felix, Meridian Capital. The man who had been sending people to stand outside their apartment door. The man who'd been sending people to stand outside their apartment door. The man whose debt I now owned. I went back to my room and I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark for a long time. Olivia's light was still on under her door. I knocked softly. She opened it immediately, like she had been sitting near it. She was wearing a big sweatshirt and holding a paperback book, and she looked, in that moment, very young and very tired and very ready for something better than the life she had been handed. "I'm going to ask you something," I said, "and I need you to answer honestly, and I promise you nothing you say is going to get you in trouble." "Okay," she said. "Do you want to be here?" I asked. "Not in this house. In their life. The way things are. Is this—" I stopped. "Is anyone hurting you?" She did not answer right away. She looked at the floor and then back at me. "Not like hitting," she said. "But it's really bad, Grandpa. I can't have friends over because we move too much. I missed 62 days of school last year because of everything. Mom forgets to sign things. Dad forgets to." She stopped. "He forgets I'm there," she said quietly. "Unless he needs me to be somewhere so things look normal." I nodded. I said, "I am going to fix this." She looked at me. She was trying to decide whether to believe me. "I know that adults say that," I said. "I know what it feels like when they don't follow through. All I can tell you is I have spent my whole life building things that last. I am going to build this for you. But I need a couple more days. Can you hold on for a couple more days?" She thought about it with the seriousness of a kid who had learned not to trust easily. "Yeah," she said. "I can do that." "Good," I said. "And Olivia, do not drink anything they bring you. Do not eat anything they hand you directly. If they offer you something you didn't see come out of the kitchen, you say you are not hungry." Her eyes went wide. "Why?" "I just want to be careful," I said. "It is probably nothing. But humor an old man." She nodded. She believed me. That trust was the most frightening thing in the world, because it was the most fragile. Over the next 2 days, I played my role carefully. I wondered. I repeated myself. I forgot where I had put my glasses while they were sitting on top of my head. Bryce began finishing my sentences with a patience that was indistinguishable from condescension. Faye started calling friends, and I could hear her on the phone in that lowered voice, saying, "He is not quite himself. It is a lot to take in. But we are managing things. We are here now." Donna filed the emergency custody petition on a Thursday morning. She also filed the report with the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services, documenting the original school counselor's findings, the current situation, and the new evidence we had compiled. She called me from the courthouse parking lot. "We are on the docket," she said. "Monday morning, I had 4 days. I called my old foreman, a man named Chip Tolliver, who had been my right hand at Callaway Fabrication for 18 years. Chip was built like a refrigerator and had a laugh you could hear from 2 rooms away, and was one of the most decent human beings I had ever met. "I need you Saturday," I told him. He did not ask why. He just said, "What time and what should I wear?" I said, "Come as you are. Don't shower. Bring the boys." Saturday evening, I told Faye and Bryce I wanted to have a small dinner. I said I had been reclusive since the move, and I thought it would be nice to have a few people over. I said I had invited some friends. I said maybe Faye could help me set the table. She lit up. She liked the idea of being the lady of the house. She spent the afternoon rearranging my dining room. Bryce spent the afternoon on his phone, angled away from me. Chip and 4 of the guys from the shop arrived at 6:30 in 2 pickup trucks. They came in their work clothes, steel-toed boots, Carhartt jackets, hands that had been calloused for decades. They smelled like welding rods and machine oil and honest labor. They were the most genuinely happy people I had seen all week. Faye came to the door of the dining room and stopped. Bryce, who had been pouring himself a drink at the sideboard, turned around and visibly deflated. "Gene," Bryce said carefully. "Who are these guys?" "My friends," I said. "Come in, fellas. There's plenty of food." Faye pulled me aside by the elbow. "Daddy," she whispered, "I thought this was a dinner party. These men look like they just came off a job site." "They did," I said. "They worked until 3 o'clock today and came straight here." But she gestured vaguely at the dining room she had spent 4 hours arranging. "This isn't what you are welcome to eat with us or not," I said pleasantly. She put the smile back on. She chose to eat with us. Chip sat across from Bryce and shook his hand with a grip that made Bryce wince. Chip had known me since I was a young man running a 2-man operation out of a hay barn. He had watched me work 16-hour days, watched me build something from nothing, watched me grieve my wife and keep showing up to the shop anyway. He looked at Bryce the way a man looks at a thing he has correctly identified. After dinner, I stood up and asked everyone to move to the living room. I said I had something I wanted to share. Faye smiled. She thought this was the moment. Bryce straightened in his chair. I picked up the remote to my television. The screen was large, mounted above the fireplace. I had connected my laptop to it that afternoon while they were getting ready. I said, "Faye, I want to talk about some things that have come to my attention this week. Things I think you deserve to hear directly from me." She frowned. "Daddy." The screen came on. I had 3 recordings. The first was from the baby monitor I had placed in the hallway on the second night, positioned near the guest room door. It was just audio. It was Bryce's voice, low and careful, telling someone named Felix that he had access to the property and just needed a week, that he would have everything settled. Faye went the color of old chalk. The second was a call Donna had been able to obtain through legal discovery from the civil fraud case in Travis County. It was Bryce on the phone with one of the investors he had defrauded, telling the man the development project was progressing on schedule and that his money was safe. The money had not been safe. The project had not existed. Bryce started to stand up. Chip put his hand on the back of Bryce's chair. Chip did not say anything. He did not have to. The third was a letter. Donna had printed it and I read it aloud myself. It was from Olivia's school counselor in Austin, dated 14 months ago. Addressed to Child Protective Services. It described a child who came to school in the same clothes for 5 consecutive days, who told the counselor she had eaten cereal for dinner 4 nights in a row because her parents had forgotten to go grocery shopping, who said she had not seen her mother sober in the evenings for as long as she could remember. The room was completely still. Faye had her hand over her mouth. Her shoulders were shaking. "I am not doing this to humiliate you," I said. "I want you to understand that. I am doing this because you stood on my porch 6 days ago and told me God had put it on your hearts to reconcile. And in those same 6 days, your husband called a predatory lender named Felix Dunn and told him he would have access to my land and my finances within a week." I folded the letter and set it on the coffee table. "Faye, I said. I know you are not entirely the villain in this story. I think you are a woman who has been making increasingly bad choices for a long time and following a man who is taking you somewhere you do not want to go. But this child has been drowning on your watch. And that ends now. Bryce found his voice. This is slander, he said. You cannot use illegally obtained recordings in any kind of legal proceeding, and I am going to. Donna, I said. Donna Marsh stepped in from the kitchen doorway, where she had been waiting. She was carrying a folder, and she looked away as she always looked, precise and completely unconcerned by the temperature in the room. Mr. Hadley, she said, using Bryce's last name in a way that made it sound like a charge. I am Eugene Calloway's attorney. I have here a completed emergency custody petition that has been filed with the Kerr County District Court and is on the docket for Monday morning. I also have here a document I would like you to review. She held it out. He did not take it. She set it on the arm of his chair. That document, she said, is a notice of debt acceleration. Mr. Calloway purchased the promissory note on your outstanding balance with Meridian Capital Solutions 8 days ago. He now holds that note in its entirety. The amount currently due, including penalties, is $382,416. That balance is accelerated and payable in full immediately. Bryce looked at the paper. He looked at me. Something moved behind his eyes that I had not seen there before. Something that looked almost like fear that was actually real. You, he said. You bought my debt. I did, I said. Why, he said. Because Felix Dunn is not the kind of man who should be holding leverage over anyone in my family, I said. Even you. Faye looked at her husband. I watched her face in the moment she understood the shape of what had happened, what he had done, how close they were to something she had not fully seen coming. She looked at him the way you look at a road you realize you should have turned off of 10 miles ago. Here's what I'm offering, I said, one time. No negotiation. Everyone was quiet. I will forgive the debt entirely. I will not pursue criminal charges for the fraud complaint which Donna tells me rises to the level of wire fraud and could carry federal charges. I will allow you to leave tonight without a police escort. Bryce exhaled. In exchange, I said, you are going to sign the consent to emergency custody. Olivia stays with me. I want it documented that you are relinquishing day-to-day custody voluntarily and without coercion. Donna will have the paperwork ready in 10 minutes. Faye made a sound. I looked at my daughter. Faye, I said, I'm not taking your child from you. I'm taking her out of the situation. You are both in. You can have a relationship with her. Supervised at first, and on her terms as she gets older. But she is not getting back in that car with you tonight. Faye put her face in her hands, Bryce said, and if we don't sign, then Monday morning a judge sees everything in this folder, I said. The recordings, the CPS file, the fraud complaint, the debt documents, and the fact that you came to this property under false pretenses with the stated intention of obtaining control of my assets. I imagine Felix Dunn will find out fairly quickly that his debt has been purchased and his leverage has evaporated. I imagine the investors in the Travis County suit will be very interested to know your current address. The clock on the mantel ticked. Chip refilled his coffee cup. The other guys from the shop sat quietly and watched. Bryce picked up the pen. He signed without reading the document carefully, the way guilty people sign things they know they cannot argue with. He did not look at Olivia when he handed the pen to Faye. Faye sat with the pen in her hand for a long moment. She looked at Olivia, who was standing in the doorway of the living room in her oversized sweatshirt, watching. Faye's face was a complicated thing. I saw grief in it, and I saw shame, and I saw relief that she would not have admitted to. She signed. She set the pen down carefully on the coffee table, like she was putting something fragile to rest. Donna collected the documents. She reviewed the signatures. She nodded at me. I walked to the front door and held it open. Bryce walked past me without speaking. He went to the rented SUV and got in, and did not look back at the house. Faye stopped in front of me. She looked the way a person looks when they have rehearsed something and lost the words for it. I did love you, Daddy, she said. In the beginning. Before it all got so, I know, I said. She touched my arm. She walked to the car. I stood on the porch until the headlights disappeared down the drive. I went back inside. Olivia was still in the doorway. Chip was handing her a plate with a piece of peach cobbler on it that one of the guys had brought. She looked at it and then up at him. And he said, in his enormous, uncomplicated way, "Your grandpa keeps the good stuff in the back of the fridge. I've known this man for 18 years, and that has not changed." She smiled. It was the first real smile I had seen from her since she arrived. I went to the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of sweet tea and brought one to her. We sat on the porch in the dark, listening to the creak in the cicadas and the sound of Chip's laugh carrying from the living room where he was telling the guys some story about a job we had done in Amarillo in 2003. After a while, Olivia said, "What happens now?" I said, "Monday we go to the courthouse and make it official. Tuesday, you started the middle school in Kerrville. I already called them." She looked at me. "You called them already?" "Last week," I said. She shook her head slowly. "You planned all of this." "I built a business for 40 years, I said. "I know how to plan." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Are you going to be okay? Like, is this going to be too much for you? I don't want to be a burden." I looked at this child, this girl who had been failed by the people who were supposed to be her whole world and whose first instinct on being offered safety was to ask whether the safety was too inconvenient for the person offering it. "I have 60 acres and a workshop and more money than I know what to do with," I said, "and you are the only person in my life who has my wife's eyes. You are not a burden. You are the whole point." She did not say anything. She leaned over and put her head on my shoulder the way children do when they have decided to trust you, suddenly and completely, the way you trust the ground when you stop holding yourself up. We sat there until the stars came out over the hill country, and the night went full and quiet, and the creek kept running the way it always had, indifferent to all the drama of the house behind us, just doing the one thing it had always been made to do. Donna called Monday morning to tell me the custody consent had been approved by the court and made part of the official record. The judge, she said, had taken one look at the CPS file and the school counselor's letter and made it permanent pending a formal hearing set for 90 days out. I took Olivia to the hardware store that afternoon to pick out paint for her room. She stood in the aisle for 20 minutes looking at the swatches the way you look at something when you are not used to being asked what you want. She picked a color called Quiet Morning, a soft blue-gray that looked like the sky above the creek just before the light fully comes up. "Good choice," I said. She put the can in the cart. Then she stopped and said, "Grandpa, what happened to the debt?" "The money he owed." I said, "I'll collect it eventually." "No rush." She thought about that. "That means you own him." "In a legal sense," I said. "For now." She nodded, satisfied by the geometry of it. On the drive home, she asked me about the welding business. She asked how I started. She asked what I built first. She asked whether she could learn to weld. I said we start at 6 in the morning and you wear the right gear, or we don't start at all. She said, "Deal." I have known, in my 67 years, what it is to build something from nothing. I have known what it is to lose the person you built everything with. I have known what it is to be shut out by the people you would have died for. And to keep working anyway, in the quiet, in the early mornings, because the work itself is honest even when the people around it are not. I do not know what my son-in-law will do with the years ahead of him. I hope, with the part of me that my wife kept soft and reasonable, that he finds his way to something real. But I'm not holding space for it anymore. What I know is this: I am 67 years old and I have 60 acres of good Texas land and a workshop that smells like steel and cedar, and there is a girl asleep down the hall with her grandmother's eyes and a can of paint called quiet morning sitting by her door, and for the first time in longer than I can name, this house is not quiet in the way empty things are quiet. It is quiet the way a thing is quiet when it is finally fully at rest. If this story moved you, hit the like button and subscribe to Revenge Whispers. I read every comment. Tell me, do you think I was too lenient with my daughter? Or did she deserve the chance I gave her? Drop your thoughts below and let me know what city you are watching from. I've been thinking about what it means to build something honestly for most of my adult life, and I think the clearest answer I have ever found is this: what you build honestly, you get to keep. Not always in the way you expect. Not always in the way you expect. Not always on the timeline you wanted. But it stays with you. It has weight. It has roots. What you take dishonestly, or what you build on someone else's fear or desperation, eventually collapses under its own pretense. I've watched it happen too many times to believe otherwise. Bryce spent years constructing an image he could not afford, and a life built on what other people were willing to believe. When the structure finally came down, his first instinct was not to rebuild. It was to find something solid that someone else had built and try to attach himself to it. That is the pattern of a person who has never learned the connection between effort and outcome. And the tragedy is that the longer you avoid that lesson, the harder the ground is when you finally meet it. Faye is a different story, and I am still turning it over in my mind. She is my daughter. There is no version of this where that does not complicate things. But I think about the way she stood on my porch with a rehearsed smile and told me God had put it on her heart to reconcile, while 6 bags sat in the trunk of a rented car and her husband was already running numbers on my land. There is a kind of dishonesty that people dress up so carefully they eventually forget it is dishonesty at all. That is the most dangerous kind, because you cannot fix what you will not name. What I know about Olivia is that she did not become resilient because her life was easy. She became resilient because she had to be, and because somewhere underneath all that weight, she kept a part of herself intact. She did not stop asking questions. She did not stop paying attention. That matters more than most people realize. The kid who watches carefully and waits and does not let the chaos around her erase her own sense of what is real. That kid has something that no amount of money can manufacture. You either develop it or you do not. I spent 40 years building Callaway fabrication, and I will tell you honestly that the discipline I put into that shop is the same discipline that let me sit across from my own son-in-law and not lose my composure. Not because I did not feel the rage. I felt it, but I had learned a long time ago that the best work you will ever do happens when you are steady. When you slow your hands down. When you look at the problem clearly before you reach for a tool. Greed is not complicated. It is just impatience dressed up in justification. Bryce wanted what I had spent 40 years earning, and he wanted it in a week. And he thought he could get it because he had looked at me and decided I was a simple man. He was not entirely wrong about the simple part. I am a simple man. I like coffee in the morning and honest work and land that runs down to a clean creek. But simple is not the same as easy to take from. Simple men who build things with their hands know exactly what things are worth. We counted every dollar as it came in, and we know the difference between something that was earned and something that was not. The most important thing I did in this whole story was not buying the debt or setting up the camera or calling Donna. The most important thing I did was look at a 14-year-old girl with dark circles under her eyes and chewed fingernails and decide that she was worth fighting for slowly and carefully and completely. Everything else followed from that. If you're watching this and you are in the middle of something that feels too big and too long and too expensive, if you are building something quietly while people around you underestimate you or use you or simply forget that you exist, I want you to hold on to this. The work is not wasted. It is accumulating. It will matter at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right way, if you keep your hands steady and your eyes clear. Olivia picked a paint color called Quiet Morning for her room. I thought that was about right.